Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our HJ International Graduate School for Peace and Public Leadership Faculty Roundtable. This is our monthly meeting where we ask our faculty members and sometimes our students and staff to speak about an academic topic of their interest or which covers an area of their research. We hope that the topic tonight will be of interest to you and also you will benefit from it. We're happy to have each and every one of you with us this evening. Of course, you know we have students, staff, and faculty gathering, as well as guests from the New York City area, the tri-state area, from across the United States, and from the attendees that I see here from around the world. So whatever time it is in your time zone, thank you very much for making time in your busy schedule to be with us this evening. We look forward to our program tonight. We will have an opportunity to receive your questions at the end of the program, but feel free throughout the program at any time to type questions you may have for our speaker, Dr. Kone, this evening into the chat box. And later, Dr. Walsh, our host, will field those questions and we'll do our best to address each and every question or comment that you may have. Also, I want to let you know that as the Dean of Enrollment Management here at HJI, I'll be sharing my contact information, both my email contact information, as well as selected links from our website about our programs of study. And if you're interested in learning more or even applying to HJI to take a course or to enter one of our degree programs, I'll share that link to the application also. So to begin our program, I'd like to introduce our host this evening, HJI President Thomas Walsh. He's going to offer opening remarks. Many of you know Dr. Walsh. He's the 7th president of HJI. He is a 1979 graduate of then UTS, and he went on to earn his PhD from Vanderbilt University School of Religion, where he studied and where he specialized in the study of religion and ethics. Dr. Walsh has been a professor at various colleges and universities around the United States and is currently teaching a class here at HJI, Ecumenism and Interfaith. So it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Walsh. It's our privilege and honor to have him with us. He is, as many of you know, worked for many, many years close with our co-founders, Reverend Sung Myung Moon and Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, particularly in the establishment and the leadership of the Universal Peace Federation International, where until recently he served as international chair. So I'd like to welcome up Dr. Walsh, our host this evening. Dr. Walsh.
Thank you very much, Dean Stephen Boyd. Thank you for your great work for HJI and our students especially, and for doing the heavy lifting and preparing these programs together with Angelica Buczynski. It's very much appreciated, the great work you do. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining this evening for, I think, what will be a very enriching and stimulating program from our very own Dr. Drissa Kone. Dr. Kone is the chair of our Doctor of Ministry program here at HJI, one of our most important flagship programs. Please, in addition to listening tonight, please consider to follow up with Dean Boyd or Dr. Kone about studying at HJI. Dr. Kone is not only the chair of the DMIN program, which entails a lot of administrative responsibilities, which he handles very well. He's also associate professor of conflict studies and ministry and teaches both courses to the Doctor of Ministry students as well as our Peace Studies Master's Program students. So he's a fine colleague. He's done significant work not only here in the United States, but also in his native country of Ivory Coast, where he has been teaching and collaborating with the University of Felix Boigny University, the major university in that nation's capital, Abidjan. And he's also published another important articles. But tonight we'll focus on the topic of the root cause of conflict and violence, a Jungian perspective. I'm eager to listen to what Dr. Kone has to say. This term, the root cause, is widely used in circles of talking about root causes of violence, root causes of conflict, root causes of injustice, etc. And many times the term implies that the root causes, if you're really serious about looking at causes, you dig down deep and you discover that there are, for many, economic roots that are at the very core of what's causing the problems. But that may not tell the whole story adequately. I don't think so. And it seems from the focus of this talk that Dr. Kone is going to lead us into a deeper psychological kind of journey of looking at the work of Carl Jung and its relevance to building a world of enduring peace. So welcome. Thank you for being here. And Dr. Drissa, you have the floor. I think midway or after the first part, maybe there'll be a short time for you and I to talk a bit, and then we'll move on to the second half of the program. That'll take approximately 30 minutes totally, and then we'll open it up to our audience. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. Dr. Kone.
Thank you very much, President Walsh, for this kind introduction, and welcome everyone. And today our topic, as you know, is looking into how Carl Jung actually viewed conflict and violence. So let me start here. This gentleman here was my CPE supervisor. CPE is clinical pastoral education. That was like almost 15 years ago. Of course, this picture is not 15 years ago. This is like a couple of years ago. The first time I was getting into CPE, learning about how to care for patients. So the training was very helpful. And my supervisor, Reverend Johnny Bush, introduced Carl Jung in one of his presentations. Credit to him, because since then I started reading about Carl Jung a little bit more, and I actually use some of his concept in my doctoral dissertation, and I have used him in my classroom presentations, in some of my articles. But one thing I came to realize about Jung, C.G. Jung, is he's a very complex thinker. It's someone who's hard to grasp. I'm still struggling, with some of his concept, because he's not a systematic thinker. He tends to be a little bit more circular in his way of looking at reality, and he has he want to reconcile paradoxes, in a way that he deal with issues, and he can start defining one terms here, talking about it, and then jump to something else, and then get back to it. So if you are very systematic in your way of thinking, like many of us, you can easily get frustrated reading Jung. However, he, I believe, is one of the most significant and influential psychologists in the 20th century. His theories and concept went far beyond psychology, and C.G. Jung is used today in many other fields: education, business, organizational development, leadership, and many other areas. So I think he has a huge impact on our modern society. So in my presentation today, I'm going to focus on the first part, talk a little bit about his upbringing, and then we're going to talk about the structure of the human psyche. And the second part, we will talk about the shadow, which is the main area that we will be looking at, how the manifestation of the shadow is in terms of conflict and violence. and how to transcend the shadow itself and get into what and conclude there. So most of my resources that I use in this presentation are the collective work of C.G. Jung, and we can just start here with Jung's upbringing. He was born in 1875 in Switzerland and died in 1961. His father, Paul Jung, was actually a Protestant, a pastor, and his mother, Emily Pressworth, was actually struggled with mental illness. Said that he was part of her family line. And of Jung growing up has difficulty with both of his father and mother. Like, of course, many of us struggle with, growing up with, parents sometimes. But these upbringing difficulties that he faced in his relationship with parents actually became the foundation for him to be interested in the human psyche. As a young boy already, Jung believed that he possessed two distinct personalities. Personality one, a regular schoolboy grounded in everyday life, and personality two, a wise, authoritative figure from a different era, deeply introspective and spiritual, probably referring to reincarnation without stating it directly. And this inner duality profoundly influenced his thinking. He ended up founding this school of analytical psychology. Jung was actually at a certain point very close to Sigmund Freud. And Sigmund Freud actually at a certain point actually said that Jung will be his successor. But finally, they did not get along. They end up going into opposite direction. I won't say maybe different direction because of a fundamental issue in psychology, which was the question of the libido. In at the heart of Jung, work in psychology, there's one fundamental question that he always raised: who am I? And this question is for him an existential question, but also it's not just philosophical, but also it's the entry point to the structure of the human psyche. This is also laid the foundation for a process for self-discovery, for self-knowledge, and eventually for healing. Jung was not only a depth psychologist, he was also a critic of formalism, especially for institutionalized religion. He believed that religion is not just an institution, it is a reality embedded in the human soul. For him, religious impulse arises from the depth of the human unconscious that cannot be eradicated at all, and is part of the human experience. Jung was, of course, a scientist, but he also actually challenged the supremacy of reason and empirical science. He get in trouble with that, especially with those who were working with Freud. They actually said that Jung was actually leaving the realm of science because he could become very mystical in the way that he approached stuff. For him, empirical science has limitation when it comes down to understanding human soul, meaning of life, and how human transformation even happen. This helped even get a little bit deeper into what he called the human psyche. In this image here, you can see basically the human psyche has two main components. You have the consciousness, which is composed of the persona and the ego. And you have the unconscious, which is a little bit more complex. I'll get to that later. But looking at the consciousness, the persona is basically the mask we wear, the role we play in society. I am actually exercising my persona right now as a presenter, and Dr. Walsh is exercises his persona as a host. We can have different personae, and which mean, like, of course, I'm a professor, but at home, I'm a husband and also a father. If I start talking about theological matter, which I enjoy talking about to my wife, she will definitely feel very bored about it, and she won't probably be interested in it. So the persona has to be contextualized. You use it in it, depending on the context. And the ego basically is, well, the I, the me. I am, I think who I think I am. And the term false self is used there, and basically, I can think that I'm a kind person, maybe a saint even sometime, but other people might see me differently. And the ego goes into, the thought process, what I believe in, my emotions, and if I'm an extrovert person, I'm a introvert person, that also all playing with the ego. And basically, if the ego and the persona is actually put forward and the other part of the psyche is not taken into account, it can easily lead to, what Carl Jung, called that personality disorder, because, this is not just who we are. We are just beyond, more than that, in terms of identity. And one French philosopher Descartes did say that I think, therefore I am. Like, human identity was so much into the realm of thought, but Jung thinks that is more than that. And eventually, if one thinks only think that he's the persona, this can actually hinder. It can hinder the personal growth and psychological development, which eventually lead to any type of difficult relationship with other people. So we have to consider the unconscious part of who we are, which is also composed of two parts. You have the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. The personal unconscious, that's where the shadow is, and the shadow is actually whatever we try to repress and reject that the ego doesn't want to recognize because of, things that we're not actually so proud of about ourselves. But we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about the shadow in the second part. And then you have the complexes, which are things that we build growing up based on our relationship with parents. And also, depending on, if we were firstborn or lastborn or middle child, or even, if we only have sisters or only have brothers, can actually influence the way that we relate to people as adult. And we can easily develop what we call inferiority complex, superiority complex. It can even get into a what we call cultural unconscious level, which goes along with religious identity complex, when, like, some people feel that the religious group is superior to other religious group, and you will never be able to convince them that it's not true. Or even racial identity superiority, and so on. And in the collective unconscious area, you have the shadow is also can be a collective shadow, which is more like expressed through what he refers to as archetypes. We're going to talk about archetypes later too. There are images. If you want images, symbols, and meat that a cultural group use to actually make sense out of life. What is good, what is evil can actually be locked into what we call archetypes. One example of cultural archetype is the cross in Christianity, for example. And you do have other part of the unconscious anima and animus. Anima is basically the feminine part in male, male, and the animus is the masculine part in female. Jung said that most conflict between husband and wife, intimate relationships, but also beyond that, can come from the fact that men don't recognize their femininity, and then women not actually recognizing or acknowledging their own masculinity, and or do not know how to express it. So that creates a lot of difficulty in relationship between men and women. and when it comes down to intimate relationship, but also it can goes along with even how to relate with women in general. People can easily get misogynist because they don't know how to relate with women because of the fact that they don't recognize their own anima. And this can happen as well with women not knowing how to relate with men in general because they don't recognize their animus. Also, he warned actually therapists who can easily get trapped into that maybe a man counseling a woman can actually get trapped into that. People, it can create some conflict there between the therapist and the person they're trying to take care of because of the fact that there's an awareness around the whole femininity and masculinity dynamic. Another part, which I believe is one of the most important aspect of the psyche, is the self. And the self, Jung referred to the self as the imago Dei. In Latin words, we refer to the image of God in the psyche. And that part of the psyche actually tend to hold all the other part of the psyche together when someone is actually being recognizing their own unconscious level and all the part of the psyche. It called that process individuation. So it's a process to be aware and reconcile all those parts, the anima, the animus, the archetypes, and the shadow, personal and collective, and the complexes. When a person is in that process of recognizing all this part in himself, then he's actually in the process of individuation, which eventually lead to some type of maturity, some type of being enlightened. Some people use those terms as well. And the self also is the place where one can actually have divine experiences, spiritual experiences, which is kind of the entry level for spiritual experiences, which actually lead me to talk about what happens sometime in terms of the collective unconscious that Carl Jung refers to it as synchronicities. These are, he defined it as events that happen without a logical cause. Like, one example is you haven't met a friend for a long time, and then you start thinking about that person, and then suddenly you receive a phone call from them. That's a synchronicity. It can also be experienced through dreams. You dream about that you have a kind of maybe you met someone somewhere, and the person give you an important gift, and then the next day, as you're doing whatever you're doing, and then that experience happened as you saw it in the dream. That's also called synchronicity. And there are, all these, terms and definition can be sometimes a little bit complex, but I try my best to explain as much as I can. And I will conclude here for the first part so that we can have a discussion, Dr. Walsh.
Yeah, wonderful, Dr. Kone. Very, very stimulating, and a lot of thoughts going through my mind as you speak. I think even of my courses with Dr. Joseph McMahon some many years ago at then UTS in the 70s, and where we covered some of this content. But it's indeed fascinating to hear you review this, and I particularly like this last diagram that you've had on the screen here. And I know you're going to talk more about this shadow, but it conjures up the concept of maybe that category within Christianity, let's say, where there's this doctrine of the fall and of original sin and something that gets inherited.
Yeah.
And it seems like even this collective unconsciousness is something that's distributed not only horizontally to all your contemporaries, but maybe as the inheritance through the evolutionary process,
Yeah.
I guess.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you have time to touch on it, but I guess there is within religion this idea that we will eventually restore this shadow, or we
Yeah.
can tame it.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering if that also figures in maybe to what you're going to say in part two, or in the uh, importance of this concept of the shadow.
Yeah. I mean, Jung actually did actually talk about I mean the whole he doesn't get too much into seeing. He's like, he himself clearly said that he's not a theologian. He's a psychologist. So he got some, he was some theologians actually critique him as looking at the whole issue of religion and spirituality from a psychological perspective, which is, I mean, is background anyway. But Jung definitely feel like he said that the shadow, um, basically you don't get rid of it, you just like recognize it, because he also talked about some positive attribute of the shadow. Now, in terms of maybe the whole notion of original sin and inherited sin, I can see some correlation definitely if you're looking at from his perspective, because basically these are things that if you get into the collective unconscious, which is basically universal and cultural, that means like you are born with certain trait and characteristic that you inherit from your culture, and then when you keep going beyond, you will get into the universality. So then that can actually be related to what maybe in religious term people might be referring to as the original sin, the collective sin, and even the inherited sin. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. And I think I hope that'll come out more as you kind of
Yeah.
talk about this in the second part of your uh, presentation. I was reminded the other night I was watching a program, reruns of Bill Moyers interviewing Joseph Campbell, who
Yeah.
was influenced by Carl Jung. And
Yeah. Exactly.
one book that I always liked was Hero with a Thousand Faces, that
This is,
kind of talked
yes.
about certain, just like there's a structure to the psyche, there's kind of a structure to narrative, uh, heroic narratives or messianic narratives or
Yeah.
the like. So this, you really open it up. There's the final thing I'd say is I like going back to your title about root causes, and so often that gets interpreted in certain kinds of understanding certain kind of social realities or more socioeconomic realities. And I think it's important that you're kind of drawing attention to the root causes that even many in religion would say is within our own spirit or self,
Yeah.
and the qualities of our character and virtue in
Yeah.
that. And I really like that you're uh, drawing out this aspect of one of the multiple root causes of conflict.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I agree. This is, as you said earlier, we tend to, look at conflict from maybe, resources. I mean, even from an, economic perspective, it's all about resources. And well, that's one aspect. Maybe, those who are in economy, they might be looking at from that perspective. And definitely, even when it comes down to how do you rebuild peace, if you have people who believe in economy, they'll focus on rebuilding like infrastructures, and they want to boost the economy. They want to create jobs, and now thinking that this will bring stability in terms of peace. But after every conflict, you also want to think about those who are wounded and traumatized by it, and even those who are keeping resentment and seeking any opportunity to come after those who probably killed their loved one. That also need to be taken into account. And I think an integrative approach to resolving conflict, looking at conflict, is actually the best way. And I think that's probably my understanding, humble understanding. That's the unification way.
Well, I want to hear about part two, so I'll stop talking and turn it back to you. So please
Sure.
continue.
Well, okay, in getting to part two, let's dig into the whole notion of the shadow. Carl Jung defined the shadow as the inferior personality, which means this is a part that is probably not, developed as much yet in terms of understanding it, and it represents the aspect of ourselves that we tend to suppress and deny. So we often present our persona, which is the outer mask, my name, my titles, and my social responsibilities in the outer world there, and then we hide the shadow, which contain threat and desire that are sometimes inconsistent with the image we're trying to portray out there. Jung explained that the ego resists accepting the content of the shadow. As he put it, the shadow personifies everything that the subject refuses to acknowledge about himself. So if somebody said to you, you're being defensive, and then you say, no, I am not defensive, that's actually a manifestation of shadow. Because the ego doesn't want to recognize the content of the shadow. And to illustrate the mechanism behind the shadow, Jung actually draws from Freudian concepts like repression and resistance. And he wrote, since from the one-sided point of view of the conscious attitude, the shadow is an inferior component of the personality and is consequently repressed through intensive resistance. So we have like a tendency to actually not only repress but resist even the shadow. We don't want to actually even touch it because of whatever happened there in terms of darkness within the ego itself. And one image for that is the inner devil that we have committed in the basement of our being, and we are afraid of the aggressiveness and force. So there's fear involved there. We are afraid of our own interiority. This is why we run away from it, and then hide in the persona itself, like the way we want to be seen by other people. And that part of us, we want to be seen as a kind person, as a good person, as a social person, but somewhere we might surprise ourselves being nasty somewhere, and we don't want to show that to the public, to the bigger public. And sometimes that easily happen in intimate relationship. People who live with you closer, they can easily see your shadow compared to if you actually a politician talking in rallies. And the persona is quite kind of a fake mirroring, while the shadow is a sort of counter persona, which is actually real. Jung said that the personal unconscious contain lost memories, which mean that there are things that we were probably 1 year old, 2 years old, that we don't even remember at all. So that's one of the reasons why it's easily denied. It can also be painful experiences that we have repressed, like trauma. It's said that usually children don't have the mental capacity to deal with traumatic situations. So what happened is a natural way to actually repress it and then actually lay it down in the shadow there. But in adulthood, he will come out in a certain way because you might not even be aware that it's the shadow that's actually directing things. It can be, forgetting in purpose. It can it's subliminal perception by which our sense perception that were not strong enough to reach consciousness itself. It might even be a content that is not ripe yet. And because the content of a shadow are are repressed, they are so frequently manifested into dreams. So the Carl Jung was able to actually analyze more than 80,000 dreams of his patient. And one example of a shadow repress that can come out in a dream is, take this example. You're scared of, you have a fearful relationship, for example, with your boss. Like, Dr. Walsh, you're not a scary person, but if you have a scary relationship with your boss, and then you can actually process that in the deep communication with him, you will repress it. And what's going to happen, you might dream that you go into your office and then a lion just jump up you and try to, attacking you and try to harm you. So that will be like a symbolic dream related to the fear that you're experiencing in your workplace. And it's, C.G. Jung went on and said there is no development unless the shadow is accepted. And awareness of the shadow content leads to self-knowledge, psychological and spiritual growth, and eventually healing and wholeness. And what happened when the shadow is actually repressed? Another phenomenon start happening. It's called shadow projection. When we do not see the shadow in ourselves and we repress it, what happened? We project it on into the outer world, on other people who then exert a fascinating power over us. We can think about them all the time. We can get emotional about them. We can distance ourselves from them, or we can even start to be closer to them. This phenomenon happen when somebody sees you and say, you know what, you look like my father, you're acting like my father. This is a shadow projection as well. And Marie-Louise Verne-France, who was very close to Jung from many years until his last days, she's a strong Jungian. She said, this does not mean, talking about the shadow, of course, that people that we hate are not really nasty creature, but even so, we could handle them quite reasonably or avoid them if it were not for the projection of the shadow, which always causes all kind of emotional exaggeration and fantasies. And she continued and said, countless quarrels, both useless and time energy consuming, are due to the fact that we are far too unconscious of our shadow and project it accordingly onto others. And Jung actually said that the root of racial and ethnic enmity and persecution can be found in the projection on what he called the collective shadow, which is part of the collective unconscious, can be cultural, and the repressed or unrecognized aspect of the personalities of members of a racial or ethnic groups are projected onto persons belonging to other racial or ethnic group. Groups are persecuted because they carry simply the projection of their oppressor inner darkness. And the collective shadow is very difficult to deal with because people support each other in their blindness. My people don't like these people, so I don't like them. My people are killing these people, so I can kill them. My people are torturing the other people, so I can do it. That's what happened when you're dealing with collective shadow. And it is only in wars and in hate for the other nations, ethnic groups, religious group, racial group, that etc., that an aspect of the collective shadow reveal itself. And the shadow can manifest into an archetype of evil. And in the collective form, the shadow can be personified as evil and take an archetypal characteristic. To confront the collective shadow in the form of archetypal evil, Jung said that it's not only problematic but can even be dangerous because people resist as a group and can even come after you. C.G. Jung believed that the greatest moral imperative modern men and women are facing is the problem of evil logged into human nature. Each person must recognize his or her own capacity for evil in a concrete form. The problem of evil, especially is urgent in the present of nuclear age. And he wrote, Western man specifically is in danger of losing his shadow altogether, of identifying himself with his fictive personality, which is the persona and ego, and the world with the abstract picture painted by scientific rationalism, which can kind of actually, brush away anything that is related to, understanding the soul and meaning of life, and in that sense. The shadow projection also can turn into dehumanization, which involves denying the humanity of others, seeing others as not individual with feeling, thought, and right, but as as embodiments of evil. And this process is closely linked to shadow projection. The perpetrators project their own unacceptable desires, fears, and threat onto their victims. And by attributing their own shadow aspect to the victim, perpetrator can distance themselves from their own darkness, like there's nothing there. It doesn't exist. It's all outside. And they can justify their action as a battle against the supposed evil of the other. By projecting its shadow onto another group, a society can justify hostility, violence, even the annihilation or extermination of the other. And in that process, of the shadow projection is twofold. First is allow the perpetrator to externalize the internal struggle. So whatever going on within him, unconscious, is actually externalized. And that inner conflict and negative threat is projected to a tangible enemy. Second is provide a moral justification for violence and as a battle against evil. And this argument is not just a struggle for survival, but a moral imperative to eradicate evil. And through the collective unconscious archetypes, symbols, images, good, evil, are shared across all culture. But that's why in every culture you have a concept of evil and the concept of good, which can actually come into archetypes, And in Africa, sometimes we actually blame sorcerers for anything. This also is called a cultural archetypes, and they shape the narrative and belief that justify action against others. The archetype of the hero battling the monster, for example, is kind of universal, a thing. The force of good combating evil. This archetype can be mobilized to justify violence against even genocide as a righteous act. One typical example that looking from the shadow perspective, projection shadow perspective, the genocide in Rwanda. In 1994, a large group of the Hutu ethnic majority, armed with machetes, spears, and other rudimentary weapons, moved house to house in villages, hunting for Tutsis, killing women and children and vulnerable people. Supported by a radio station called RTLM, allied with leaders of the government of the Hutu, and picture Tutsi minority repeatedly describing them as Iyenzi, which means cockroaches, or Izonka, snakes. And the Tutsi were also referred to as parasite who benefit from the work of the Hutu. And that gave them, the moral justification to go after, the Tutsi minority, calling them with familiar name calling, reframing of the Tutsi as the enemy of the country, rhetoric that the Tutsi were traitors who deserve no other punishment except death. And then when it become like a part of the collective narrative, people start acting on it, and it can lead to definitely a genocide. That also happened with Nazi propaganda. During the Holocaust, the Nazi propagandists actually routinely used terms like vermin or list of diseases, including bacilli, parasite, cancer, and excrement to refer to the Jewish people in the area under their control. And those targeted group is often compared to a disease like microbe infection or cancer, which means the group is dangerous and we need to get rid of them. Jung actually went on and write about Hitler on this term. He said, all these pathological features, complete lack of insight into one's own character, autoerotic self-admiration, denigration, and terrorization of one fellow man, projection of the shadow, lying, falsification of reality, determination to impress by fair means or fool, bluffing, and double crossing. All these were united in the man who was diagnosed clinically as an hysteric. I mean, he was not mentally okay, and whom a strange fate chose to be the political, moral, and religious spokesman of Germany for 12 years. Is this pure chance, he asked? Of course, no, because it was first part of the collective shadow of the German people. In international politics, too, you see a lot of shadow projection happening. On November 5th, 1975, the Supreme Ayatollah Khomeini, the supreme leader of Iran, was quoted as saying that America is the great Satan. And in 2002 State of Union, President Bush actually labeled the nation of North Korea, Iraq, and Iran regimes that form an axis of evil. Hugo Chavez, president of Venezuela, in 2006 addressed the United Nations General Assembly, where he famously proclaimed that President Bush is putting at risk the survival of the human species and called Bush repeatedly the devil. These are some ways that the archetype of religious projection live inside of politics as the highest global level. The effect is not to encourage dialogue, clear thinking, or related feeling, but to defend one's own power position. And Carl Jung believed that one human beings, as individual, we can actually transcend the shadow. He doesn't use the term eradicate; he used transcend the shadow. Even as a collective society, it's possible to transcend the shadow. Jung work suggests that humanity holds the potential to transcend the shadow through the process of self-awareness, which means knowing the unconscious part of individual groups, nations, and self-exploration, which means like understanding all these dynamics that are happening within the psyche level and how to integrate. You use the term integration. Which mean integration means like kind of try to unifying all these contradictions within one own self first. Then it's much more easy to deal with it when it comes to the outside situation. We must learn to confront and acknowledge the darker aspect of our nature as a society. Then we can begin to dismantle the psychological mechanism that lead to conflict and violence. The process of shadow integration is not about denial or suppression, but about bringing these aspects into consciousness. When the shadow is understood and integrated, which you call individuation, the process of individuation, it is through this deep psychological work that individuals and societies can move beyond the archetype of conflict and the archetype of conflict and violence. In conclusion, Jung argued that while the conscious mind enables great human endeavor, moving the world, making great things, and making the world a better place, it does not always allow deep self-knowledge and psychological development. So if the world denies its own capacity for darkness, it's easily project that darkness onto each other. That projection is not very helpful when you are in the middle of a geopolitical power struggle. You need to sit down and talk about nuclear disarmament, not rant at your enemy, your political opponent, and the next thing will be using violence against him or them. To Jung, psychology should do what Christianity does at its best: give self-knowledge to human beings. We gotta get to know each other. We need to get to know oneself in a deeper sense. Empower them to individuate, like getting within all this dark part of ourselves and understand it and how to use it, and to become full human being with full integration of conscious and unconscious, light and shadow self. Only those individuals who work through themselves and do shadow work deeply can withdraw the psychological projection of their own darkness onto their enemies and become peacemakers. And I will conclude with this term, until, with famous quote from Jung, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Thank you very much.
Oh, nice, nice presentation, Dr. Kone, and nice conclusion. I like that quote about fate, and because one of my questions was about fatalism. But I want to move to our audience. We have a lot of good questions. I have about 5 or 6 lined up here. I'd like to uh, welcome those who raise questions in the chat to even voice them verbally. Just turn off your mute button and speak. I'm going to just ask Dr. Wilson and Dr. Kone, I'd like you to give brief answers just so we can get
Yeah, sure.
remaining, followed by Magnus Larson, Frank Lagrateria, then Jim Edgerly. We'll go in that order. Dr. Wilson.
Yeah, so I asked, what did I ask? Let's see. How could you, about the self? You had in the diagram at the beginning, you talked about the self. So I was asking, how do you come to recognize the self? It wasn't really the main topic of your talk. You were mainly talking about the sort of the surface level of the shadow and the ego.
Yeah.
But there's all this deeper stuff in Jung's model. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit to that. How do you come to recognize or realize the self? What is the function of the self in Jung's psychology?
Yeah. Quickly, the function of the self is Jung called the self the image of God in the psyche. Basically, I think is referring to what in religious term we mean by the soul, and how you recognize that you have to go through a process. He used the term individuation. And individuation has something to do with actually what we call introspection. You have to actually go back within yourself and explore who you are deeply. Why do you think the way you think? Why do you feel the way you feel about certain issues? Why do you become defensive about certain matters and not others? You have to explore that, and sometimes it goes deeper into your upbringing, childhood, relationship with your parents and relationship with your siblings, the environment you grow up in. All these introspective approaches will lead you to a place of yourself where you can meet God. I mean, I'm using term. You can actually meet God or meet the soul if you want, which is God speaking, God being with you. And when you get to that point, then eventually there is a whole you become all those parts become harmonious in yourself. And I think maybe that's what we probably unification mean by mind and body unity. The term that we use sometimes to talk about people who were able to reach a certain level of self maturity.
Thank you,
Very
Dr.
good. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. I'm going to ask, is Dr. Frank, are you there? Are you able to just voice your question?
So my question is, did Jung address a kind of universality of his theories and his models? In other words, how did he account for language in the way he described the human psyche or other parts of his teaching? And do they correspond with, other cultures, perhaps how the other cultures also described the psyche?
Yeah, he tend to be a little bit more, it tend to integrate particularity and universality. You will see that he will recognize the particularity of cultures and languages and how they express in unique situations. But also he's like a thinker that actually go deep into universalities. That's why he even used the term cultural unconscious and universal unconscious. So the cultural unconscious will be all these religious language and cultural and will be actually in that realm, and then the universality, then you will find element that will actually be part of the universality into different cultures. And as an individual, you have to actually go through that also as a group. That's why religious groups have to recognize their own particularity as a religious group, but also element in their religious group that are universal, which help them relate better with other religious organizations.
Thank you, Dr. Kone. Very good. So Magnus Larsson writes, how do you distinguish between experiences that arise from the subconscious or unconscious in Jungian terms and those that come from the spirit world, as understood in Reverend Moon's theology or other spiritualist traditions?
Yeah, I think that's what Carl Jung has been working on in his own, interpretation of dreams. I am not I'm not an expert in that area of interpretation of dreams, but he did clearly identify what a dream that is related to spirituality and a dream that is purely what he call based on the experience you had with your environment. So the distinction point, I believe, for him comes down to when he's doing therapy.
Yeah.
There's one quick example that I can use when a lady who was very, a lady who was very, very rational and scientific. She had a dream, the night before she saw a scarabée, and then she came to him and she shared the dream, and then when she was talking about it, like the actually scarabée actually came to the window at the same time, and then he grabs it and say, here is your dream, and then that actually helped the patient move in their healing process, because it says sometimes those spiritual dreams can actually help those who are too rational and too scientific and tend to refute mystical experiences to heal better. That's just one example.
All right. Jim Edgerly, if you're ready, you can ask your question. Otherwise, I'm going to read it in the interest of time.
I'm ready.
All right, quickly, please.
It was partially answered in the second half, but I guess I'm very interested in the power of the cultural unconscious, which sounds to me, Dr. Kone, like the cultural unconscious has a shadow element to it.
Exactly.
And I'm wondering, does Jung think we need to all go through, every one of us individually needs to go through psychotherapy to deal with the self-introspection that's needed to identify these shadow aspects of our cultural and collective inheritance?
Not necessarily, but everybody has to do some type of shadow work. It doesn't have to be necessarily a strong psychotherapy work, but any kind of even meditation, for example, can be helpful. Any kind of shadow work. It can be having a maybe practicing some type of rituals that can help you get into yourself. It doesn't have to be all just limited to going necessarily to see a therapist. Anything that can help you get into self-knowledge, self-awareness, deep self-awareness, and individuation is helpful.
Of course,
not just as an individual, but also as a group.
Yeah, it's easier for many of us to deny our shadow and to.
Oh yeah, that's what we do all the time anyway. It's the most easiest thing to do.
I'll go next to Elio Roman. Can you briefly state your question, Elio?
Yeah. Let me see if I can turn on. Basically, Dr. Kone is discussing concepts that Dr. Jung taught, but there's an actual experience that we need to go through to achieve individuation. Yeah. And it's not going through psychotherapy. It's not introspection, right? And basically what Jung said, the process is pain and suffering. Mm-hmm. The pain and suffering that you experience
So, Elio, is this a comment or a question?
Well, I'm answering. Okay, Dr. Dace, it's Dr. Elio Roman. It's Dr. Roman or
Okay,
Dr. Elio.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay, can you explain? You explained the process was introspection.
Yeah.
But it is not introspection. It is the pain and suffering that one goes through. But can you elaborate on your idea that it's just introspection?
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about, one, maybe, I mean, there are two distinct things here. What you go through when you are into your own introspection, what you go through is not always, pleasant. Basically, you meet your dark side, and that I can understand from your point that definitely can be part of suffering and difficulty, because they're not actually if you, let's say you went through a traumatic situation when you were 1 year old and you were not even aware of it, and then you start your individuation process, you're gonna face that reality there, because you will have to find a way to process it, and that can be a challenging situation. You might also face difficulty in real life, which could probably lay the foundation for you to actually be a little bit more, let's say that you are going through maybe divorce, you have difficulty in your marriage and all these things, and then you think that the issue was always out there, and at a certain point you pause and say, you know what, maybe I need to look at myself a little bit more into this. Maybe there are things about me that I haven't recognized that I need to deal with, so that my relationship can improve. It can also be a collective group, maybe an organization that's going through tough time, difficulties, division within. Maybe there might be a time where they need to pause and reflect on their situation from within, and actually reflect on all these traumatic situations, the losses, the painful things that we did not address that need to actually process. Which could be,
okay.
Quickly.
Sorry, Dr. Roman. I've got to move on, just to be fair to the other questioners. We're out of time. Sorry, Dr. Roman. Maybe you can chat offline with Dr. Kone.
Yeah, I'm happy to discuss with you, and then, yeah, sure.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick ones. I'm going to go next into Rabbi Lou Weiss asks that he has understood that at times Jung defended the Nazis. Was that part of your understanding? This is an
yeah. There's a there's definitely a certain, he has accusation in that area, but I read his autobiography written by one French writer who actually clarified this issue. Jung was never into this at all, and I will encourage you to read more about it. This was just something that, he was, I think, naive, accepting it being part of a journal that was promoting that, but it was not, part of the Nazis groups. No.
Okay, I'm sorry for those that have questions in the chat, and apologize, but thank you for being here, and feel free to email Dr. Kone. Dr. Kone, you have a final word, and then we'll turn it back over to Dean Stephen Boyd. Thank you again, Dr. Kone. Fantastic.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Dr. Walsh. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I mean, in 1 hour, we will not be able to, finish all these issues about Jung. I mean, he's a fascinating thinker, somebody who influenced me a lot into the way I look at conflict, and but I want to encourage you maybe to read a little bit about him. You might see certain things that could be helpful. About 2 years ago, I joined the Carl Jung Foundation in New York City. They have resources, a lot of resources there that can be very helpful. I'm not a Jungian therapist, no, but I am just someone who uses some of his concept to address my area, which is conflict resolution.
Well, thank you. Let's give round of applause to our great featured speaker for this faculty roundtable. Thank you, Dr. Drissa Kone. Dean Stephen Boyd, I'd like to invite you for any final words.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Walsh, and thank you, Dr. Kone, for a very illuminating presentation. As you said, in 1 hour, it's impossible to pack in everything about Carl Jung's theories and backgrounds, and even one aspect of his the great body of works that he published. So thank you for making the effort. I think you stimulated a lot of questions in our own mind, and I just like to reiterate, if any would like to dialogue with Dr. Kone directly offline, please, I'll drop his contact information in the chat box, and you feel free to do so. So thank you everyone for taking time again this evening to be with us. We will be having first of all, the recording of this program will appear on our website in a couple of days, soon we edit it, and will also appear on the HJI YouTube channel. Earlier in the chat, I had dropped in the URL for you to link to that, or you can find it on our website also. So you're welcome to review the recording afterwards. We will be having another program in the month of May. You'll be receiving an invitation very soon for that. So just thank you all again for coming.